Thunder rattled the village windows, shaking the floorboards until the wood groaned. The woman moved through the dark, her hands steady as she snatched the infant from the cradle. Outside, the rain turned the world into a blur of gray, but she did not stop. She climbed the mountain path, the wind tearing at her, until she reached the peak. There, she placed the child inside a tower of seamless, polished glass. The walls were smooth, cold, and entirely unbroken. There were no doors, no stairs, and no way out. She pressed a hand against the exterior, and the glass hummed, sealing the infant inside. Leora grew up in a silence that felt heavy, like deep water. She was never alone, yet she was never with anyone. Thousands of surfaces caught her image, repeating her every twitch and turn. When she reached for a toy, 1,000 hands reached back from the walls. When she wept, the room filled with the sound of 1,000 sobbing children, a chorus of echoes that never faded. She spent her childhood tracing the outlines of her own reflection, learning to mimic the movements of her glass counterparts. Every 7 days, the floor vibrated. A narrow slit opened near the base of the glass, and a metal tray slid into the room. Leora knelt, her movements precise, her eyes fixed on the sliver of space. The woman stood on the other side, a dark shape behind the translucent wall. Her face was hidden, obscured by a heavy veil that never shifted. Leora reached for the food, but the woman tapped the glass, a sharp, rhythmic sound. "The outside world is a place of fire and blades," the woman said, her voice muffled by the thick barrier. "It is a world of chaos that tears everything apart. Only these walls keep you whole." Leora pressed her palm against the glass, trying to find the warmth of a human touch, but the surface remained icy. She wanted to ask about the world beyond, but the woman turned away before the words could form. Leora watched the silhouette vanish into the mountain mist. She stood in the center of the room, surrounded by 1,000 versions of herself, all mimicking her posture, all staring back with the same hollow curiosity. She felt the weight of the glass pressing in, a protective shell that felt increasingly like a tomb. She practiced her movements, trying to be exactly what the walls demanded. Leora moved through the center of the chamber, her arms tracing a slow, rhythmic arc. She had performed this sequence 1,000 times, her steps perfectly mirrored by the walls. She turned, her breath hitching in the stillness, and prepared to pivot. But in the mirror to her left, the movement did not end. Her reflection continued to sway, its body twisting in a direction Leora had not chosen. She froze. The reflection remained in motion, its eyes locking onto hers with a sharp, independent intensity that felt like a physical strike. Leora stepped back, but the figure in the glass leaned forward, pressing its palm against the cold surface. The other reflections in the room blurred, their movements becoming frantic and disjointed, but this one remained focused, its gaze burning through the glass. It leaned closer, its lips parting to reveal a voice that sounded like grinding stone. "You are a prisoner of light," it whispered, the sound vibrating through the floorboards. "You do not belong here." Leora stood paralyzed. As the reflection tapped the glass, a rhythmic, insistent beat that echoed in the hollow space. The walls, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage closing in. Leora moved toward the mirror that had spoken. She did not hesitate. She pressed her forehead against the surface, expecting the familiar, unyielding chill of polished glass. Instead, the surface gave way. It felt like thin ice over deep water, yielding to the pressure of her skin. She pushed harder, her fingers sinking into the silver plane as if it were liquid. The reflection beneath her hands distorted, its features warping into a chaotic swirl of light. She lunged forward, putting her entire weight into the breach. With a sudden, violent crack, the mirror shattered. The sound was deafening, a roar like a mountain collapsing in on itself. Shards of glass exploded outward, filling the air with a blinding spray of silver. The shockwave rippled through the room, hitting the other walls. One by one, the surrounding mirrors spiderwebbed and burst. The entire tower began to disintegrate, the structure losing its integrity as the light traps failed. Leora stumbled forward, falling through the jagged frame. She hit the ground hard. Her knees struck cold, damp earth, the texture rough and uneven against her skin. The woman stood at the edge of the clearing, her silhouette trembling against the rising light. She screamed, her voice thin and frantic. "If you leave, you will lose who you are!" Leora did not answer. She looked down at her own hands, now stained with dust and real, unreflected blood from the shattered glass. The sharp sting of the cuts was the most honest thing she had ever felt. She did not look back at the pile of shimmering shards. She turned away from the woman and toward the horizon. The first light of dawn spilled over the trees, washing the forest in gold. Leora took a step, then another, her boots sinking into the soft, uneven earth. She walked into the trees, leaving the silence of the tower behind, moving into a world that did not require a mirror to prove she existed.